Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. This week we have an exciting announcement. We are delighted to announce that we are once again partnering with Kia UK. Kia have been the proud sponsors of the iconic Kia Oval since 2010 and have been heavily involved in the world of cricket in that time, investing in the men's, women's and grassroots game. Last year, Kia brought us our very own Kia's Movement That Inspires moment, where they gave away some incredible opportunities to get you closer to the action. Listen out each week to hear how you could get involved and win some fantastic experiences this summer at the Kia Oval. The T20 World Cup is underway and it's been an exciting start. Teams that we don't usually get to see at World Cups have given us stuff to talk about, and conditions have given the top teams something to think about. We'll be talking about the first few days of the tournament, a bit on the T20 Blast, and in the middle of all that, we'll have a Q&A style thing with Mark Butcher. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Ben Gardner and the returning Jo Harman. Jo, welcome back. Genuinely fantastic to have you and some common sense back on the pod.
Thanks very much. Lovely to be back here.
For the listeners who might have not kept track, remind them and us why you haven't been as regular a presence on the podcast as you used to be.
So somewhat bizarrely, I have started a new life on the west coast of Ireland with my fiance out there. We're in the sticks. Got 3 chickens, 3 hens since I last saw you. My London cat has moved to Ireland with me and is unfortunately destroying the local wildlife, which is actually quite bad. That's quite traumatic.
And you, as you were just saying before we start recording, you were on the Northern Line this morning coming up from Balham, very different lifestyle.
Yeah, there are things that I miss and there are things that I don't, and that definitely falls into the latter category. But it is very, very nice to be back here at the Oval. Although yesterday, we're not in our office at the moment because of the England match recently, and I was just trying to find a pub to watch the England-Scotland game because I don't have Sky when I'm here anymore because I don't have a house, and it was impossible. The Hanover bastion of the Oval cricket centre. I went in there and they said, no, we're not showing the cricket.
Wow.
And then I went down to the Joiners Arms in Camberwell, if you know that one.
I go there all the time now.
To watch sport?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
It's a bit more kind of down at hill than some of the pubs, but I like it for that in Camberwell. It's a bit of what Camberwell used to be. And they were showing the cricket, but the guy behind the bar was definitely not going to put the commentary on for me. So I was watching the rain fall in Barbados whilst listening to absolute 80s in a completely empty pub, and I thought this doesn't feel like World Cup fever, but maybe we haven't quite got there yet.
It must have been really confusing when there was that patch on the pitch. I mean, which we'll get to, because you must have no idea what was going on. It's like...
Very, very confusing. I couldn't work out for the first 10 minutes why they weren't playing. I thought I'd got the start time wrong. And then it wasn't a great game after that, was it?
We definitely need to talk about the Joiners Arms afterwards. That's become a big part of my life since you went away. Ben, can you explain what the Butch Q&A is? So Butch is doing a Reddit AMA. That might not mean anything to a lot of people. What is it?
Yeah, how deep do you want me to go? I guess people don't know what an AMA is. A lot of people might not know what Reddit is. I mean, I hope people know what the internet is.
Let's start with Reddit and then we go to AMA.
Okay, so Reddit it's sort of a social media site, except accounts are mostly anonymous, and really it's for link aggregation and for discussing of, I suppose, shared interests. So you have different what they call subreddits, and Butch will be unsurprisingly on the cricket subreddit, where he will be doing an AMA, which stands for Ask Me Anything. So users can log on there, ask him a question like written down, and he will, I guess you're going to read out the questions to him and he will then read them out.
Yeah,
he will then answer them speaking, and then we'll transcribe the answers and then post
so there
them.
Is some level of censorship. He doesn't have to answer every single question that gets...
You can ask him anything, but it's not he'll answer anything.
So with a few hours to go until the AMA, there have already been hundreds and hundreds of questions sent in on the subreddit. The one with the most upvotes is, hello, Mr. Butcher, what is your favourite cut of meat? So plenty to look forward to late in the show.
Have we ended up on the wrong subreddit? This is for meat connoisseurs rather than cricket fans.
Anyway, on with the T20 World Cup. Let's start with yesterday's game. England were saved by the rain from a potentially awkward run chase in Barbados yesterday. They would have needed to chase 109 from 10 overs before the rain came down for the third time, as Ben mentioned. The game was delayed by at least half an hour at the very start because there's a brief shower, and there was just a very damp circle on a length on off stump. But once they got that cleared away, Scotland had 2 darts in the centre before eventually the third shower ended the game. Joe, it was only 10 overs of action, but what did you make of it?
England were a bit loose, definitely reminiscent of that defeat to Ireland in the T20 World Cup. That was the last T20 World Cup, wasn't it? Good. And obviously that was the kind of trigger for what followed, and they really kind of roused themselves but didn't really put a foot wrong after that point. But yeah, similarly, a bit sloppy in the field, little bit full, a little bit short at different points. And Scotland, that's a good opening pair. They've got George Munsey's been doing that for a while now. That reverse sweep off Rashid was one hell of a shot. And Michael Jones is a really good player. Has got some runs for Durham over the last couple of years. So that we knew beforehand that they wouldn't be a pushover. And yeah, when the rain came down, Scotland's chances of winning the match were certainly better than they were at the start of the match. You'd probably still have made England favourites in a 10 over dash, but I think Scotland will feel a little bit frustrated. But it makes things potentially quite interesting. If England lose to Australia on Saturday, and Scotland can beat the other associates, then we're looking at a net run rate scenario between Scotland and England potentially.
And not just a net run rate scenario, but one in which the last game in the group is Scotland against Australia. So it could possibly be that Australia could and Scotland could conspire for...
Australia could crawl to victory and let Scotland in through the back door. That would be great telly, wouldn't it?
That would be fantastic. That would be absolutely fantastic. Season 4 of the Test would be particularly good to watch there. Amazing stat from this game. England have now played 5 games against European opposition at T20 World Cups and haven't won a single one of them. What was the other thing to say? I said, Munsey's switch hitting is so good. I almost wonder he should bat right-handed. The shot off Rashid was extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, not the first time he's done it, as you say. Yeah, I mean, and he is just a very, very good player. That's the thing, you know. We can talk about, did England avoid like a banana skin? One, I think that they still likely would have won, but also Scotland are just a good team. Like and it's partly why this is like that. There are some things to like about this World Cup format is that like you're giving chances to teams who can beat very good teams on their day, and those victories would mean something if they happened. And like if Scotland beat England, sure it would be a shock, but like you wouldn't have said at the start of the game that it was a completely unthinkable thing that could have happened. And players played like they played well within how you'd expect them to, but it wasn't as if we could never imagine that Munsey could switch at Rashid, because he is a good player.
And they've beaten 4 member sides in each of the last 2 tournaments as well.
And they don't play enough cricket, Scotland, but they do play enough to be a cohesive team, and that team hasn't changed a huge amount over the last couple of years. They've lost kind of Callum McLeod, Kyle Kurtzer, but they've got good players who have come in, and the rest of the core seems to still be there. They know how they play, and they're dangerous. I mean, I would expect them to beat Namibia and Oman, and then you know, you never know, if there's rain in other games, they could have a chance.
Joe, speaking before the game, Jos Buttler was maybe a bit more short with the press than he normally is. What did you make of that? There was one interview in particular with Henry Moran from the BBC where I thought Henry asked a set of
very reasonable questions. And Henry's a very nice man. It seemed an odd response from Buttler. I guess maybe he's just having a bad day. It didn't feel like they were particularly provocative questions. He can get a bit spiky. I kind of like it when I see it. I mean, I thought that was... I felt for Henry, because that's not an interview that anyone enjoys doing, but I kind of like it when I see that spikiness in Buttler. He's definitely got it in him. And maybe, I mean, Morgan wouldn't have handled that interview like that, but Morgan could also put an interviewer in their place quite firmly, and there was a kind of steeliness there that you probably wouldn't have seen from Buttler a few years ago. So whilst it wasn't a particularly pleasant thing to see for that 20-second clip, I quite like Buttler, the strong leader, and it's necessary as well. I mean, there would have been a lot of soul searching after that disastrous 50 over World Cup when they were just so limp and looked so short of ideas, and it was a real throwback to what had gone before. So if they come in a bit meaner, a bit nastier, then that's no bad thing. But be nice to journalists, guys. That's a bit uncalled for.
Well, Matthew Mott gave that prickly interview at the end of the 50 over World Cup as well, didn't he? Where he is basically asked, "Do you want to share anything you've learned from this tournament?" And essentially said, "No, I don't think it's my, I don't need to, tell the public anything," basically. Which is, I mean, he's sort of entitled to do that. But I guess it is, there are also just different types of prickness, aren't there? There's like the prickness you can get from like being asked either a question that someone thinks is stupid or unfair or obvious or something, but there's also just the, why am I wasting my time with this? And I don't think Butler quite crept into that, but I guess if England do end up, flaming out, I suppose we've got the two, first bits already written. We've got the, the press conference and, the slightly false start against Scotland, I suppose.
Well, England are next in action against Australia on Saturday, and that is a very, very big game given no result against Scotland. Elsewhere in the tournament, we've had some really good games between associate sides. So in the tournament opener, US chased 195 in 18 overs against Canada. Aaron Jones blasted 94 not out off 40 deliveries. Namibia Oman went to a super over, and PNG ran West Indies really close. West Indies only just crawling over the line, and there was a similar game yesterday between Netherlands and Nepal, the Dutch eventually winning on that occasion. Joe, going back to the tournament opener, that was incredibly watchable because US-Canada isn't the game you normally expect to open with the World Cup, and actually it did befit it being a tournament opener.
Yeah, I was slightly surprised when I saw that as the curtain raiser, but actually after the game it did feel like the perfect fit. It's quite a small ground in Dallas. It wasn't full by any means, but there was a decent crowd in, looked like a good atmosphere, and you get a kind of, not a miracle knock, it wasn't quite that, but from a guy who New York born, raised in Barbados, I think, but had no kind of form, doesn't have much of a record. And Aaron Jones comes out and smashes this 94. 10 sixes, I think. Only Chris Gale's hit more in a T20 World Cup innings, I think.
Yeah.
And you saw at the end how much it meant to him. So actually it felt like a really good start to a tournament that, we're all wondering what it's going to do in the States. Are people going to actually pay attention? And from what we're kind of hearing on the ground, maybe not so much. The established cricket fans are really excited to have it. Are they going to break through to a new audience? I think that's going to be a tough sell, but hopefully you get a few along the way. But no, it was a really good game. Canada played their part in it as well. That was a competitive total, which set up an interesting game. And Dallas, I think we'll come on to the New York pitch a bit later, but the Dallas pitch looks like a really good one. Looks like a great one for T20 cricket. So that's encouraging as well.
Ben, you watched the West Indies PNG game. PNG really did push West Indies, who several people are tipping for the title, very close.
Yeah, especially because this was a pitch that was actually tougher to score on. So when it got to the stage where it was like 10 and over needed, ordinarily West Indies, you say, okay, PNG have done okay to get to this stage, but West Indies will kind of cruise it. But actually, I think like this is not a pitch where anyone has scored quickly on. And okay, it was at that point Andre Russell comes in, so you're thinking like he could just take the game away, and that is what he did. But then you're also like, he is one miss away from being out, and then all of a sudden it's Roston Chase and the tail basically. And Roston Chase he also then got going, but you could easily imagine him not having got going. And it was, Russell hit the first six that kind of got them into it. The player that I thought stood out most was Ali Now, who was they were loving him on commentary opening the bowling. He conceded one run off his first 10 balls, so started with a maiden, and then kept up until
what does he do?
Until Brandon King came. Well, so he's sort of high 70s, but there was just a lot of control there, and also pretty canny. I think like he was doing some good stuff, sort of like following bats when they were trying to make room and making use of the pitch. It was not, I think when we talked about the Dallas pitch, the New York pitch, you can see some counter bowls doing quite well there. It was not uncounter cricket in some ways, but it was just like good variations at that high 70s pace where you're not getting pace on the ball, and it was really accurate. So he went pretty well. So yeah, that was a fun game, and although West Indies did end up sort of waking up just by the end, there was it was good for PNG. And also I think there's quite some canniness just in how they got up to a total that at first you thought, well, that's nowhere near what they're going to need. Why haven't they tried to go a bit harder? And if you end up collapsing, then so be it. But actually, you can just see in like first game of World Cup, weird things happen in World Cup. Maybe the other team aren't going to get using conditions as well. You can see the value actually of getting up to sort of any sort of total, even if you give up the opportunity of getting up to what you might ordinarily consider a competitive total, because actually maybe you can do something with it. I thought that was quite a canny bit of gameplay from them as well.
Let's talk about that Sri Lanka South Africa game at New York because that was unique. Sri Lanka were bowled out for 77 after 19.1 overs, and South Africa themselves took 16.2 overs to get those runs. So overall, a run rate of 4.42 runs and over. There were 6 fours in the entire game. Ben, what did you make of this match as a spectacle for the brave new world that cricket is trying to break into?
Yeah, I don't know, because I mean, you're supposed to that this isn't, a great game for someone getting introduced to cricket. For one, comparing to baseball, they don't score many runs in that. So actually, and also, I just thought it was like a really interesting watch, basically, even if it was like a very weird T20 cricket, like kind of unlike anything before. It was that the outfield was almost as big an issue as the pitch, and I know we're going to talk about dropping pitches, but you can't drop in a new outfield. I guess you could maybe just cut it more. Would that solve it?
I think the outfield was a bigger issue than the pitch, personally, because the 6 fours, most of them that I can remember, were basically one bounce fours. Any time a ball was drilled on the ground, the sandiness of the surface just sucked all the life out of it. And a couple of times.
So with the sandy surface, do you think they're worried about cutting the outfield too short, and then you create a kind of death trap for fielders that we saw in Dharamsala in the last tournament?
Potentially, I can't. I'm not an expert in conditions like that, but there were a couple of balls that the pitch wasn't ideal, and there were a couple of balls that died on the keeper. But of the balls that died on the keeper, sometimes you could see like a proper puff of sand coming from the outfield, which you just don't normally see. And I suppose that explains just why it was such a slow outfield. Ben, do you want to explain what a drop-in pitch is? Because there's a lot of talk around it on commentary without much explanation as to what they actually are.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of is what it sounds like. They sort of they grow.
It's quite an impressive logistical feat.
Yeah,
whenever I hear it explained.
Yeah, and like I guess I always think of it being sort of airlifted in. I think more often it's by lorries or by a big truck. But yeah, they basically grow the pitch somewhere else where I guess they can really sort of do everything you need to do to a pitch to get it ready, and then you carry it as far as you need to, and then kind of stick it in. And it's about how deep is it normally? It's I mean, it's not like we're getting 6 feet down, isn't it? There's a bit of depth there. So yeah, it's an impressive operation.
And this particular pitch has gone on one hell of a journey, right? It started in Adelaide.
Yeah, overseen by Damien Howe, who is the Adelaide Oval groundsman.
So yeah, started in Adelaide.
Yeah. Then
went via boat to Savannah, Georgia, and then to Boynton Beach, Florida, which these are not places that I've heard of, and then over on a lorry to New York.
Sounds like a great gap here, doesn't it?
That. But one of the reasons why people have been talking about it so much is because of the other games that are held at the same venue, including Pakistan, India on Sunday. That could be amazing to watch, where you just can't hit fours.
You don't want every game played on this surface, clearly. And after the India-Pakistan game, what I'm about to say might sound ridiculous because it might be a complete farce. But I like the variety that we've had. Yeah. I think that's been a mark of the first few games of the World Cup. As you both know, I can't claim to be a religious follower of the IPL, but the early rounds, there did seem to be a sameness about it. Small grounds, the impact player rule having a real big impact in that all sides had basically 12 players to pick from. And yeah, there was a kind of a sameness to the type of games you're watching, and we haven't had that at all. We've had every game has been very, very different so far, and if a few are not what we expect T20 to be, I'm cool with that. There is obviously the concern that we're taking the game to America, we're trying to break America, and a bad game is almost like shameful for us as cricket fans because we're not showing them the best of it. But let's be realistic. Cricket's lots of different things, and it's weird, and if people don't like it for what it is, then I'm afraid that's just going to be how it is. So I think seeing cricket in different ways is no bad thing. An India-Pakistan low-scoring game might be an absolute thriller. I mean, it might be a much better game than a high-scoring game, in particularly the way that Pakistan are playing at the moment. You could just India getting completely out of reach of Pakistan, and then it being very one-sided. And there is nothing worse than a one-sided T20 game in cricket, I think. Like it's just a very, well, maybe 50-over cricket, one-sided 50-over game. So yeah, I'm not wholly against it. If the final was being played there, that might be a bit of a concern as well. But there's loads of games in the tournament. If a few are a bit different, I think that's okay.
And to be fair, watching that South Africa chase, I know they were only chasing 78, but quite early on during it, I was thinking, it's not going to be easy to score these 78 runs. And you're wondering, was par 100? Genuinely, was par 100?
Well, Nokia described it as a close game, which I thought was probably a bit, that wasn't quite accurate. But you could see how it could have been. A couple of wickets here or there. I think Klassen said afterwards he thought the pitch wasn't great. Although he did say that he thought the DJ was on point, which I thought was a good, which I think meant that the DJ wasn't playing when the bowlers were running up, rather than saying that the DJ's tunes were great.
Okay.
But it might have been both. I don't know.
There was an India-Pakistan game in the Asia Cup in 2016, which was also early on in Muhammad Amir comeback, and Pakistan were bowled out for 85, and then it came quite close to defending it. Like Amir bowled this incredible opening spell that's worth digging out on.
Oh, this is
YouTube,
amazing!
it. And then Kohli basically was just like, I'm just going to have to dead bat this for like as long as I can, just to play it out. And then sort of there was like a sort of a pressure release and cover drive quite late in the game. Kohli ended up being man of the match, hitting 49 or 51. And the fast bowling quality on both sides in this game, if we get something similar, that just would be really, really fun.
How do you see that Pakistan India game going?
Well, I think Joe's definitely right that obviously alien conditions make it harder to predict, but even conditions that just favour the bowlers a bit will bring Pakistan more into it, because they have the two most consistent T20 batters there have ever been, basically, who if you need to just get up to 160, 180 and that really keeps you in the game, then they will be good at doing that. And if you need a team who's going to get 200, then they are not as good at doing that. And Pakistan also have that that brilliant four-prong fast bowling attack in Shaheen, Naseem, Amir and Haris Rauf. I mean, having said that, Pakistan are just not in great form. I mean, we saw them get beaten pretty comprehensively by England, sort of stumble through a series against Ireland, draw a series against second string New Zealand side. India, I guess, don't know their form because they've been playing the IPL. But when you and there are questions there as well. Rohit is in bad form, and especially on a pitch like this, if that can end up being quite damaging. If you sort of get somebody who gets stuck for quite a long time, you can sort of see that happening. And then also Kohli has been trying to be more aggressive, but again, if you come to a pitch where it's like, we might need to rein it in, they're going to need to strike that balance as well.
I can see Kohli's running between the wickets being incredible on this pitch.
Yeah, that's true. He's going to run about 1 million.
Because if you can't hit fours, it becomes about hitting twos and sixes, and that's where you think Pakistan don't have many six hitters.
Yeah.
And India do actually lower down the order, especially Sky.
They've got Sky. I mean, Pant as well looks like he's probably going to win that race to be the wicketkeeper. Shivam Dubey as well. So I mean, India are favourites, of course, but the conditions might be something of a level up, I suppose.
Just something else on this game. So Tikshana, the Sri Lanka spinner, said after the game that the schedule's basically unfair because Sri Lanka have one of two teams that play their 4 group stage games at different venues. And Naman Agarwal, part of the Wisden India team, did a piece yesterday sort of comparing how much travel each team does. And there's a vast difference. So Bangladesh, I think, at the top of the list, they nearly travel 10,000 kilometres from when they first arrived in the States to the end of the group stage, whereas England travel 500 kilometres. But it's basically clumped in groups. So actually, although Bangladesh are at the top, they don't travel that much more than the teams in their group. And whilst England have comparably barely any travel, the teams in their group are all just playing in the Caribbean, in islands quite close to them. So Sri Lanka have it slightly worse, which I guess you always have with major tournaments, but it's not so much worse than the teams that they're actually competing against for a place in the next round.
But could make a difference come to the Super 8s, perhaps, if you're that much more tired, if you sort of have to struggle through a tough group, travelling lots, and then you get there and you're playing someone who's been sunning up in Barbados.
Oh, well, they're not sunning up, are they?
Yeah, that's true.
And you couldn't blame them for being tired. Did you see the details of their flight was delayed on the way over, so they ended up spending a whole night at Miami Airport.
Is England?
No, Sri Lanka.
Okay.
Sorry, Sri Lanka, yeah. Only, I think, 2 days before the start of their game, maybe. And they couldn't stay in a hotel in New York because the other teams who are playing there more regularly have booked out all the hotels. So they had to get up at 5:30 that morning in order to start their game at 10:30. So, they could be forgiven for being quite tired. It's not a schedule that suits them.
5:30 start's definitely not ideal. Just on American cricket more generally, Joe, this tournament is obviously seen as a huge opportunity for cricket to grow there. Elsewhere in American cricket, there was huge news yesterday in that Pat Cummins has signed a 4-year deal with the San Francisco Unicorns in the Major League Cricket. That's basically unprecedented for a player like Cummins to sign a contract like that for any league in the world, let alone one that's only been in existence for 1 year.
Yeah, a real statement from Major League Cricket. You couldn't really get a much bigger name to add to your roster, and for that length of time as well. And from the statement that he gave with the press release, this is not just about playing cricket; it's a real connection to American cricket as a whole, and it, I guess it shows the next direction that the game is heading in. This tournament coincides with the 100, or very nearly coincides. It does coincide.
There's overlap.
There is overlap
with both the 100 and the Blast.
Yeah. So that will be, there'll be alarm bells ringing for the ECB, who are obviously trying to make the 100 super rich and super big, and the next IPL, will they end up not even being the biggest tournament in their window? It's a distinct possibility, and we already know they're struggling to get players for the 100. They need to start offering more money to get the biggest players. But if America are coming along and sweeping up talents like Cummins, the big names, the people that want to turn up and see these players, then it's going to be a hard sell for the 100. So, yeah, big news. And you suspect he won't be alone. There will be others that follow. You don't just have Cummins go. There will be more players signing longer term contracts, I think.
Yeah, and we had this past week as well, Shaheen pulling out the 100
to
play in global T20 Canada. So actually, are they even going to be the... And the thing is, the 100 might
is that how it was explained?
So it seems he's like seeking a deal in that. I think that deal's not yet confirmed, but that's what the reports are.
That's quite damning, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, and I guess part of the issue as well actually is also the draft format. So because you have each set of each wage block, that works to some sense, and it's really transparent. And the draft, I don't think they've quite nailed it from a TV point of view, but you can see that being an event at some point. But it does mean that for the very biggest names, say you're a global T20 Canada, for example, you can fork out more than the 100 could afford for 16 slots for 4 players, and then go down the rung to the next ones. But then you've got 4 of the biggest names in world cricket, and it means the 100 doesn't get those players, and then you're going off a tier below. And if you're trying to get some sort of cut through, but you're missing those players that people who sort of vaguely know cricket but don't hugely follow may well have heard of, then that is an issue.
The 100's done well this year in securing the services of West Indian players. They agreed that thing with the CPL to make sure the two competitions don't overlap, and that's managed to get quite a few high-profile Caribbean players in there. But if Shaheen's not playing and Pat Cummins is signing up for the next 4 years, whatever you think about the 100, in 20, 30 years' time, these T20 leagues are going to be ever more dominant, and English cricket is falling behind quite quickly. And it's not just Cummins. If you look at the list of players signed up, I think in the team that Cummins is playing for, they've already got Harris Ralph and Matt Henry as well. That is better than any English domestic side can put out in either white ball competition. Moving on, for this year's very first Kia Movement That Inspires moment, Kia is giving you the chance to win the best seats in the house for the Surrey-Gloucestershire T20 Blast game on the 14th of June at the Kia Oval. You and up to 5 friends or family will get the opportunity to watch the match right by the pitch with a VIP experience, including food, drinks, and a tour of the ground. These really are the best seats in the house. You have the best view in the ground. You're as closest to the action as you can get. For a chance to win, all you need to do is enter via the link in the description. Anyway, let's head to the Mark Butcher Reddit AMA. So welcome to the Mark Butcher Reddit Ask Me Anything. So the way this works is we put a photo of Butch out on Reddit yesterday and to invite questions in, and hundreds of questions have come in. And there's a way on Reddit for other Reddit users to sort of show how much they like the question. So you upvote or downvote questions. So we can also have a look at what the most popular
Okay.
questions are. The most popular question by an absolute mile. I almost apologise for asking this before I ask it. Hello, Mr. Butcher. What is your favourite cut of meat?
Christ. Okay, I'm quite partial to a ribeye. I mean, I don't know whether you upvote or downvote that answer. It probably gets flatline, I should imagine. But that's it. That's
Cool.
go to.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for doing this. My question is, if there was one rule you could add, change, or remove from the current game, however big or small, what would it be?
Wow, that is a good question. There's so many different formats. Where are we looking? Let's start with test matches, shall we? They're less rules than sort of regulations, I suppose, around things like. I would love to see the game played at a slightly higher pace, and so to find some way of introducing. The shot clock idea in T20 is a great idea, and I think it will work in test matches as well, where you're allocated a certain amount of time, or you do it in sessions almost, so that you had to make sure that you made 30 overs per session without any sort of rain breaks. And I don't think that would be beyond the wit of man to do. And what that would do is obviously you wouldn't get the wasted overs at the end of test matches, and of course this doesn't happen in every country anyway. But what it would do is tactically that would become part of the game. Part of a captain's job and the captaincy role would be to kind of look at, how are we going to manage to get our 30 runs in? Now, what the penalty 30 overs in. Now, what the penalty might be for that would have to be something in game, and because this is all back of a fag packet off the top of my head, I haven't quite got the right answer for that yet. But I do not think that it should be impossible for a limit of, say, 28 to 30 overs per session to be the absolute minimum that gets bowled, and that there is a penalty for not doing that.
Well, in county cricket, you have these enormous middle sessions because they have to have the middle session go until there are 32 overs left in the day.
We used to, thinking about in the 90s, perhaps, when there was 110 overs a day. I think, what were we, 98 now? In
96 in the
96,
county stuff,
okay, 96 in the county games. So there were 14, there was almost a session or half a session more overs to be bowled, and that would be exactly the same case. You'd have 2.25 hours, 2.25 hours. 2 hours was the playing time, so it's a 6.5 hour day as opposed to test matches, which were 6. But you would have exactly the same thing. There needed to be 32 overs left before you could take the tea break. So very often, hour and 15 means you're supposed to bowl somewhere around about 34 or something, 34, 35 overs in a session. So if you were below 30, which quite often you were, you'd end up having to bowl 40, 42, 44, 45 overs in that middle session. It was just mad. And it didn't do a great deal for the sort of like the quality of the cricket. And if you think about it, you think about what having a sort of a minimum amount of overs would do in the game, it would kind of naturally mean that the captains would need to bowl a little bit more spin. You wouldn't want a 4-man seam attack or a 5-man seam attack with no spin bowling option. And it also becomes part of part of the sort of the stamina idea of a game of cricket, where you don't just lose 8 overs at the end of the day, particularly in test matches. They just wipe them out now. You don't even have to make them up the next day. So I think that would be something I would do.
Hi, Butch, always been a massive fan. How did you personally handle retirement and everything that comes with it? It was a sad moment for me.
It was a sad moment for me as well, although it felt like it had been coming for quite some time. I had some rather nasty knee injuries that kind of put a stop to it at the end. I took it really well. I mean, look, I had the opportunity to do quite a lot of work in the media whilst I was still playing, and so I'd done a lot of work for Sky in the 2 or 3 years prior to my retirement, and kind of that was a natural thing for me to do. I had something to do and somewhere to go once I was done. That isn't always the case for everybody when they get to the end of the road, and it can be very, very difficult. But I was 100% ready not to be a professional cricketer anymore, and I think that was the thing. I was 36, played for 20 years, had achieved pretty much everything that I would have wanted to have done, and was absolutely at peace with the idea of not playing cricket anymore, and have been ever since. There's not been a single day, fortunately, and it's, not everybody has the same thing, but fortunately I was absolutely ready to stop, and haven't regretted it for a day. And I think one of the reasons behind that was that I think I might have regretted it if I'd carried on. I didn't want to get to a point where I hated playing the game, so I still have the same enthusiasm for watching it and for being interested in it. And there's no sort of bitterness around the fact that it ended at all.
There are lots of questions about your media career. Commentary looks like a job where you just hang out with your mates, having a great time. Does it feel like that?
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. I signed my first ever professional contract at the age of 17. I'm now 51. And barring the odd sort of stretch of time in that period of 34 years, I don't feel like I've done a proper day's work yet. So I did a few before I signed as a cricket player, and I was a maintenance man and an electrician's mate and all that type of stuff. Worked in a building society, would you believe, for a very short period of time. But since the time I signed a professional contract up until this day, I don't feel as though I've done a real day's work yet, and it's good.
What is the journey from being a player to a commentator? Like you said that you started doing media work whilst you were still a player.
Yeah, I got lucky in that when I was playing for England, I did my first ever sort of TV commentary on the World Cup in 2003, which was fairly disastrous because, and people might think, well, that makes sense. Literally, you kind of like handed a microphone and sat down in front of a live game. And my first ever game commentary, I think, was England versus the Netherlands in that 2003 World Cup.
Was it quite difficult because you were still an active England player?
Yeah, kind of.
You're commentating on your teammates.
I mean, I wasn't involved and was never involved in the one day setup. So on that score, it wasn't like I was crossing any sort of line with the people that I was talking about. But I had no idea what I was doing. They literally sat me with a live mic, and the lady's name, whose name escapes me, is a brilliant female commentator who used to do the radio for the West Indies. And I wish I could remember her name. It always escapes me. Anyhow, she was doing her first TV gig too. So, and we were leading off. First over, me and her. 2 balls went by before one of us picked up the microphone because both of us was expecting the other one to lead the thing. And that's how little. I mean, it's shocking, isn't it? If you were running a restaurant or something, and you had you hired a maitre d' or somebody who was going to greet your, the front of house man, and you hired somebody that had never done it before, you just pulled them off the street and said, "Here, this is your gig." How well would you expect that to go? Well, that was basically what happened, and so I had to learn pretty fast. Got the fortunate thing was then Sky would do a lot of county cricket and stuff at the time, and I had guys like Charles Colville around a lot, Bob Willis around a ton. Bobby, I sat next to Bob for so many games, and you're just soaking it up. It wasn't like he was there teaching, but you were kind of like, well, if you don't sort of sit and watch and listen and work out how this gig is done from being in that close proximity to somebody like him, then you're a bit of an idiot. So it was very much a case of watching and learning and listening. And then in the end, you end up being yourself anyhow. I think that one of the most difficult things when people start is they think that there is a way that commentators are supposed to speak. So you hear with these funny voices and people not sounding like themselves at all. And then, there are little bits of discipline along the way, which kind of, as time has gone by and as more and more players have sort of entered the commentary box and less broadcasters or less and less people with that broadcasting experience are around, some of those disciplines have kind of like disappeared out the window a little bit, and that's, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, but everything moves on, and punters kind of like new voices and players that they recognise and things like that. So it's a changing landscape, and the only thing is just do a bit of work, I think.
So the next question was,
yeah,
what does commentary preparation usually look like? How far out from a match would you typically begin researching and prepping notes?
Not a massive amount. It depends on what it is. So if you're going to do, if you're at the beginning of a test series, for example, then you might spend sort of like a day and a half just wandering back through things. One of the, obviously with all that time in a test match, was always handy to have not necessarily stats and numbers, which again have become much more prominent in cricket commentary than perhaps they were 20 years ago. But to have anecdotes, and one of the great things about having played is that you'll sit there and you'll watch a scenario and it will trigger off a memory of something that happened before. So you don't always have to have sat there pouring through numbers and all that kind of thing to be able to make a relevant point about something that you might have seen in the past, or a player, or whatever it might be. But then when it comes to sort of T20, do a lot of T20 tournaments around the world, and you'll turn up, and the first thing is you're kind of like, okay, well, get the team names right. If it's the first time you've done the tournament and they've all got these weird and wonderful names, and you're kind of looking out in the field and you recognise half of the players and they're all playing for different teams, and so that becomes a case of you literally sort of sit down, make squad lists. I keep notebooks throughout tournaments like that. I do it for the Blast as well, so that I can just back reference games. You can see that the 11 that played in the last match that you covered, or you might do all of them. So so you runs, wickets scored, all that. Just keep a little scorecard, sort of manually. A lot of people do it on with tablets and stuff.
Well,
but I prefer to write it down.
I've noticed when we do daily pods during World Cups and stuff, you like handwriting 11s and scores.
Yeah, and just make little side notes around scenarios. A lot of the time with the leagues and things like that, there are so many different permutations about what might happen if a game goes one way or the other. It's good to have sort of like 3 or 4 different scenarios in your mind, so that it's kind of fresh. But having said all of that, those things are incredibly useful, and because in the media as cricket commentators. If you think about the way football coverage is done, whereby you have commentator, say it's Martin Tyler for argument's sake or whatever, and you've got co-commentator Ali McCoist, okay? They call the game, nothing else, right? Then you have your presenter sat in the chair who asks questions of maybe 3 pundits, and their job is to give opinions. And then you have another guy or 2 guys, a guy and a girl, maybe out on the ground asking questions, doing interviews and all that kind of stuff. And none of those jobs get mixed. But what we do in cricket is we do all of them. So you have to be one time you're calling the game, you're a commentator, you're watching, you're saying what you see, you're commentating on the game. Tea time, you're a pundit. You're down there with Wardy, and you're critiquing what you've seen and giving opinions about things. And then, come the end of the game or beginning of the game, you might be out there asking questions of the captains and stuff, doing tosses, doing the presentation, all those kind of things. So all of those jobs are mixed up in a way that they're not necessarily in a lot of other broadcasting worlds. And I think a lot of viewers get a little bit confused as to what it is that they're listening to you do. When you say something down at halftime or at lunchtime, that's an opinion. When you're up here commentating, you're calling the action, you're calling the game, and those 2 things are actually very different jobs. And so, stay abreast of what's going on in the world of the game as much as you possibly can. Try and find ways of wandering away from the game as much as you possibly can too, because it's a long time. Even 50 over games are a long old period of time, and if all you're doing is saying what people can already see on the screen, then it's pretty damn dull. So you have to be able to wander off and come back when something happens.
Hello, Mr. Butcher. What's the most memorable mistake you have made in the commentary box?
It was last year, I think. It was last year. Now I'll probably make the same mistake again. Now we've started to do quite a lot of the T20 Blast games off tube. So we'll be in the studio at Sky and not actually on site. And then before that, we moved from commentary boxes where you kind of get a great overview of the ground to calling games from the pod where the view is pretty average, and sometimes you don't know who's where. Anyway, on this particular occasion, we were in the studio calling a game down at Hove. And let me see if I get it right this time. Brad Curry takes one of the greatest catches you'll ever see. It was Brad. Yeah. Diving on the boundary, just horizontal, just clutches this ball out of the air that was travelling at 1,000 miles an hour. And I think, I'm lead commentator, so I've called it. That's stunning, unbelievable, gone a bit mad. And then Scott Curry,
No.
or maybe his brother Brad, all in the same breath. So I kind of caught myself as I did it, but I was like, oh my God, what a moment to have called the kid the wrong name. And I still get reminded about it now.
Oh, people have done a lot worse. People have done a lot worse. Hi Mark, I was there at Headingley when you smashed 170 odd against the Aussies, clipping off the pads and cutting beautifully. Was that your career highlight? And there's a second question.
Yeah, go on.
Why didn't you bowl more? I remember you hooping it around corners.
Yeah.
So career highlight and why didn't you
Career
bowl?
highlight, but for sure. I mean, I think that was. I may have played as well as that another time on a few other occasions for England, but never with that sort of impact. Against that Australian team, fourth innings of a Test match, all of the ingredients were there to make it really memorable, and it opened a lot of doors for me. I'm pretty sure that had it not been for that, even if my career from that moment onwards had kind of gone exactly the same way, but without that innings in it, then I probably wouldn't be sat here doing this or working the TV and whatever. It kind of opened a lot of doors for me, which was incredible. And I'll always have the old man to thank for sort of re-coaching me again, or sort of re-teaching me how to bat again over the course of the winter before that. And as far as the bowling is concerned, I was kind of a reluctant bowler, really. I started off my career as a bowling all rounder here at the Oval, and got into the first team sort of batting at 8 and bowling first change. I was reasonably lively for a little short dude sort of in the early days, but burst both my groins and had to bowl every ball like it was the last one I was ever going to bowl, and the body didn't like it very much. So as my career sort of went on, I bowled less and less. And but then I'd always bowl in the nets and stuff like that, and always had a sort of natural ability to swing it and could hold a length as long as somebody didn't try and slog me out of the park. And so it became one of those things whereby captains they'd go through their options maybe 3 times and then turn to me,
How do you think your game would have evolved if T20 was around when you started playing, and any of your former teammates, who do you think of them would have made excellent T20 players? Did we miss out on Alan Mullally's T20 franchise career, for example?
Well, possibly. I think all of them, I think it would have benefited every single one of the guys that I played with to play it. I remember, so we just won in the West Indies, 2004. Harmison 7 for 12, Hoggard's hat trick in Barbados, all that, that trip, Lara's 400. And we came back sort of, I think my first visit back at the Oval, they were in the middle of doing some T20 practice off the back of that trip. And I had a couple of goes in the middle practice, couple of goes in the nets, and it kind of unlocked something that had been completely alien to my game up until that point, which was just trying to hit the ball as hard as I could. And I found out that I could actually hit it quite a long way. I thought that was Ali Brown's job, or Adam Hollyoak's job was to hit the ball far. They were much harder hitters of cricket ball than I was. I was always looking to time it. But then suddenly you realise, oh my God, you have the ability to kind of, to clear the boundaries and to hit the ball with a lot more violence than perhaps you'd known before. And I would have loved to have done it earlier. The big difference, people always go on about, it's the bats and it's the boundaries and all this kind of stuff. It's the intention to hit the ball as far as you can possibly hit it, allied with guys who lift a lot more weights than we used to back in the day. That's why they hit it so far. And what it teaches you, actually, I think, particularly if you've had a grounding in sort of technical batting, lining the ball up, all that kind of stuff, is it teaches you about sort of positivity of movement. That whole idea about, if you're looking to be hyper aggressive, you actually move better than if you're sort of standing there and trying to stay tight and all that kind of stuff. And that was an incredible lesson and a really, really valuable one. I mean, I don't know, it must be very different for people who come into it and T20 is the first thing that they do, because then they kind of have to learn how to bat afterwards, or they don't bother. We're seeing enough players who just decided, it's too difficult, it's not for me, so I'll stick with the bashing the ball stuff. But it was certainly a massive eye opener to me, and I'd been a pro for 14 years, but at that point.
Ali Brown is someone a lot of people talk about as someone who would have made a lot of money if T20 cricket was around in his time. Anyone else from your era who wouldn't have had a go in T20 cricket?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of internationally. So Hollyoak springs to mind, who's back here, actually, funnily enough. He just heard yesterday or 2 days ago that he's doing a sort of consultancy coaching job back at the Oval, which is wonderful, wonderful news. The whole thing has gone full circle and he's back here again. There are lots of fellas, I suppose. You know, it would have been really interesting to see what sort of a player Alex Stewart might have been had he done that as well. You know, so Mike Rambrakash scored hundreds playing in T20. He kind of took to it like a duck to water. There were a lot of people who, without any question, had the talent to have made a really good fist of being T20 players. It's just, as I said, the difference in the way that you think about, and I'm talking about batting, I guess, more than bowling. I wouldn't know, but just the horizons that it opens up in terms of what you're actually capable of if you have the intention to kind of go out there and be hyper aggressive. So yeah, there'd have been tons of players.
Hi Mark. England were notorious for constantly changing their team in the 90s. Did you feel there were any players who never got a fair go, and were there any uncapped players who never played for England who you felt should have? So either players who never got a go or only got a short go. I mean, on Surrey, someone I always thought in the 90s, I was surprised didn't play as much given his record. Martin Bicknell's record here was amazing for a long time.
Well, I mean, Bicker's got he got a shout early, didn't he, on that Ashes tour back in the beginning of the 90s, and kind of had a lot of injury problems. And then from probably about 97 onwards up until he stopped playing to 2003, he was the most reliable, best new ball bowler in the country, I would say. There are probably plenty of them, you know. I mean, the interesting thing about the question is that in the 90s, most people did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are very few people who didn't get a go at one point or another. So maybe the question should be the other way around. So who played that shouldn't have? But it could go down to a lot of people as well.
Moving on. So this is from Zenon, a Windies fan. Mark, being of Caribbean descent, what was it like growing up in England? In your teens, what was your greatest moment on a cricket field, and have you ever felt disrespected in a setting in your career?
No, I was very fortunate not to really encounter that. And when I've spoken about this subject, or when I made the documentary about it, You Guys Are History, I was always very aware of the fact that other people's experience had been very different from mine. Now, so just to explain that, yes, my mum's Jamaican. Yes, my mum's side of the family are all, you know, black Caribbean. But my old man played for Surrey and was a white guy, you know. So not only was he a professional athlete who ended up playing international cricket, but he was white. And my mum and myself and my brother, in the sort of 70s and whatever, we spent most of our time up here, and the Oval was surrounded by, or not surrounded by, but was full of people from the Caribbean. Obviously, Sylvester Clarke was the overseas player at the time. The stands were always full of West Indian characters from, you know, the surrounding area, Stockwell, Brixton, Camberwell, whatever. And so this place always felt like it was very, very welcoming, I suppose. And add to that people treat you differently if you're good at sport in a lot of cases. And again, that's not the truth for everybody, but I'd hear things like, "Oh, you're not like one of them," you know, when I was out playing school cricket and stuff like that. You know, and I'd be kind of, well, what do you mean by that? You know, so I was always aware that other people, I got treated better than other people did when I was a kid, because of who I was and because of my, you know, my background. People knew me. I think that's probably the answer to that. But I said, you know, there were odd moments and odd times on the field where people would say things that they regretted almost instantly, you know. And I was very fortunate not to have had, you know, a lot of the stories surround kids who are sort of denied opportunities because of their race, because of their colour, or whatever it might be. And there's a sort of like a bias or a prejudice when it comes to, you know, maybe clubs or school teams or whatever, and you kind of have this, because there's no meritocracy there. It's kind of like, you know, you want to fill the teams with people that you like and all that kind of thing. It can be very, very difficult. But from a personal level, I've been very fortunate.
One more before the quick fire questions. Mark, you're a legend, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying one of my favourite commentators. The humour and banter you come out with far exceeds most of the others. No offence to the others, of course. As for my question, would you ever take a Rob Key-esque role? You always come up with different thoughts to the norm. I'm sure someone of that thinking would be well suited to it.
I get asked that question quite a lot, actually. And it almost goes back to my comfort in having given up the game as a player. I absolutely love what I do doing this, and it would take something very, very special to kind of to drag me away from it. And don't get me wrong, I can't, it's the best of all worlds. I get to still be at cricket matches, travel the world, do all of those types of things. There's the responsibility that I have to it is to the viewers to sort of entertain and inform, but I don't have any. As soon as I leave the ground, that's it. I'm not thinking about team selection and things like that, having to worry about it.
Yeah.
And I felt like I did enough of that while I was a player. And so at this moment in time, I have no real itching to sort of get into it. So he mentions Rob Key there, and he's a really good parallel, because Rob also did this gig and was very good at it. And who knows, we might see him back in it soon enough. But Rob always felt that when he stopped playing, that he kind of didn't quite get everything done that he wanted to do. His career was slightly unfulfilled in terms of his ambitions with England and all the rest of it. Which, in another time he might have played. He was a damn good player, Keezy, damn bloody good player. And so when the offer came up, or when the job came up, and people were talking about him, and he was asked to go and do it, he leapt at the chance. Whereas I'd probably have thought twice. And
maybe three times,
and then said no, and then said no. But I don't have any burning sort of desire to do that. I mean, the director of cricket job is up here at the Oval, and I've had a couple of people ask me if I wanted to do it, and I'm kind of like, I don't. I see Stewie out there in the tracksuit and all that kind of stuff, and still being involved in the dressing rooms, and I'm thinking, I've done that. I kind of want to leave that to other people, but who knows? Give me another 5 years' time, and people are sick of the sound of me. Or just a change of scenery. I tend to be reasonably restless in most other parts of life. So you never say never. But right at this very moment in time, no.
On to the quickfire questions. How often have you been confused with Mark Boucher?
That's a question from somebody who knows the answer, I reckon. Yeah, it does happen a lot.
Yeah,
it does happen a lot.
Best teammate to tour with or share a room with on tour?
Oh dear. So long time ago since we shared rooms. I mean, I think the last time that would have been a thing for England teams would have been the 97-98 West Indies tour. Because after that, sort of things changed quite dramatically in terms of the way that they looked after the England team and tried to be more professional and everything. But on that trip, it was Adam Hollyoak. It was our first tour together, and we were pretty much inseparable at Surrey, and had been since sort of like the under-11s or something up to that point. So we shared rooms together. Got into a bit of a spot of bother, I seem to remember. We were staying. Of the things that I can tell you anyway. We were staying at this amazing all-inclusive place in Antigua. We'd had a month build up to the first test, right? And Adam and I hadn't played a game, hadn't had a net. We were not involved in any way, shape, or form in the plans for whatever the first 11 was going to be in that first test match in Jamaica. And so, a month's downtime, you're in this all-inclusive resort. There are yachts everywhere, and it's kind of like, it's very, very pretty. And you can't do any practice. So we'd sort of train, we'd run and kind of lift weights.
There weren't enough facilities for squad players to play?
No. There weren't even enough facilities for the main players to play. There were no nets. And so you kind of, there was a little bit of boredom. I remember they'd bring in a massive old bowl of fruit every day. And one particular afternoon, we spent bombing the yachts in the testing our arms, throwing oranges at these, bouncing them off the decks on these yachts for a little while, which got us into a bit of bother. But he was always good fun to share. I think I shared with Thorpe on that trip as well. He was a very good man to hang out with.
Who's the most technically gifted left-handed batter you've ever seen?
Lara, of course. I mean, I think for the more modern day, I guess Kumar would then be next, I suppose. In fact, technically, he's probably better than Brian, or at least more orthodox than Brian. But I'd never seen anybody play before or since like him. I mean,
we can save Lara chat for a later
save that
day.
for later.
What's your dream commentary crew for a WTC final at Lords? 6 people max, past and present.
World Test chat. Well, blimey, you'd have to have Richie in there, wouldn't you? I mean, I'd never got the chance to commentate with him, and there'd be a lot of air for you to kind of get your point across. I think with Richie is the old school way that he would do things. Robin Jackman. Jack is for sure. I used to call him Uncle when he was here bowling for Surrey with the old man. But I always loved his voice, and he had a really lovely way about him, lovely way of spinning a yarn or just describing the action, I suppose.
He's one of the commentators who, when you listen to him, you can tell how much he's enjoying it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So I'd have to have Bob. Bob all day long, just nailing people with a glint in his eye. And I better say some of the boys I'm with now, and I was going to get upset with me. I always have a lot of fun on air with Nas and Ath.
Yeah.
So what's that, 5?
That's 5.
Okay, 6.
We can do with 5. 5's
Yeah,
fine.
no, I think the question was asked, so I better come up with another one, hadn't I? Oh, well, I'm the 6th, aren't I?
Cool.
There we go.
There we go. This is from First Bolt Loves, who says,
"Oh, hang on. No, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I'll give you 7.
Okay.
Tony Gregg and Bill Lawry.
There we go.
Yeah, and you can leave me out. I don't even have to be in it.
So Firebolt Loves says, "Hi Mark, big fan here. My parents always tell me that one of my first words was butcher because I used to watch you on the TV with my dad as a child. Anyway, I wanted to know who's the toughest bowler you faced, and who do you think would be the toughest bowler to face in the current era?"
I think they're both the same bloke, actually. I didn't Ambrose. I played against Kirtley in the very early part of my Test career, and I had very little idea what I was doing, really, or at least I thought I did, and then I played Test cricket and realised I didn't. And he was very, very unpleasant indeed. And wouldn't necessarily always bowl quick either. Could kind of, go up and down the gears a bit, but would hardly ever bowled a bad ball. And the reason why I think he'd be good now as well is because he could spear a Yorker in there pretty much at will from that sort of height.
And current bowler who you wouldn't fancy facing?
Well, Mitch Stark didn't look like a lot of fun on that 14-15 Ashes trip. That didn't look.
Oh, Johnson, you mean?
Mitchell Johnson, sorry, not Mitchell Stark.
Yeah.
Mitchell Stark. That looked rather unpleasant. And who else now?
Bumrah doesn't look fun.
No,
with that release point.
Yeah, that anybody with a sort of slightly tricky action and some people that can really sort of like hit a small box in terms of length and whatever. Just kind of don't let you out. He would certainly be up there.
I think I know the answer to the next question, but we'll ask it anyway. What is the one thing from modern day cricket you wished was there when you played cricket?
Well, where do you want me to start? I mean, we'll start with the obvious.
Yeah.
Large amounts of cash.
Yes.
And the ability to play all year round. I mean, that's something that players of my vintage and before. The opportunity to sort of earn money as a professional cricketer, if you weren't playing for England, was just not there. There wasn't one. You'd go and play grade cricket, and you might get your flights and do a bit of coaching to earn some money for your stay in Australia or whatever, but you wouldn't earn any money. And so, you know, nowadays there are guys who haven't played international cricket who still earn a really good living around the world playing in the franchise stuff, and I think that's fantastic. I do not begrudge that for 1 second. It's about bloody time. So there's one or two things. I think that there's been a lot of talk, actually. Obviously, there was that questionnaire from the PCA for the modern players about sort of schedules and stuff like that. And it did make me laugh. And they were sort of complaining about late night bus rides, coach rides and all this kind of stuff, and travelling and having to play the next day. And I was thinking we basically do that for 6 months every year, and you would drive yourself, 2 to a car. I remember
the number of days of cricket. The max someone plays now in English summer is about 75 to 80.
Yeah.
And for when you were playing, it was obviously circumstances are a little bit different.
Yeah.
But would have been
no, it was
100-ish,
it was a lot more. Yeah. We played a lot more, and the type of travel was a lot worse. I mean, even going back to splitting 4-day games or 3-day games with a Sunday league match in a different venue on the Sunday. You'd start Friday, play Friday, Saturday, play a Sunday. There was a famous one. I think we ended up a game it might have been Scarborough. The 3-day game or the 4-day game was happening in Sussex, and the Sunday league game was in Scarborough, and so half the team went and they played the second team the other half. And they had to come back and finish the 4-day game in the morning. So that made me chuckle a little bit. So that would have been an absolute joy. The idea that they'd do a lot of coach travel. One of the interesting things actually about playing at the Oval is that coach travel was not necessarily making life any easier for you, because most of us would live around the outskirts, around near the M25. Yeah. So you'd have to come in to London before you got on the coach to go back out again.
You get stuck in the traffic.
Well, yeah, you just put 2 hours on the journey anyway, so you might as well drive. But yeah, I mean, things are very different now.
Couple of music questions. What's your favourite Bob Dylan song and why?
Good grief! I mean, what's that? 30, 40 albums or something? I don't know. It'd have to be One on the Day, I reckon. That's just too much. My tiny brain can't handle that question. But I've been listening to the outtakes from the 80s and whatever, and that's pretty damn cool. And there's a tune on there. I mean, it's quite a famous outtake. It was one that was never released on the Infidels album. It's called Blind Willie McTell, which is pretty damn cool.
And your favourite song to play on the guitar?
So if I've had a few drinks, and inevitably, if there's a guitar in the place, someone will sort of plonk it, give it to me, and sort of say, play something.
And you'll reluctantly.
Well, but it's one of those things where I'm kind of pissed and I can't remember I can't remember anything. So there's one song that I can, that no matter my state physically or mentally, I can always play, and it's called "Can't Find My Way Home" by Blind Faith. It was written by Steve Winwood, and that I can pretty much do under any form of circumstances.
Two more. Which ground has the best food worldwide?
Well, Lords. I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer. It's the only place where you get an actual menu, and you got about 4 or 5 different choices for everything: mains, starters, desserts, and there's food all day as well. From the time you get there in the morning, there'll be a great big trolley full of the best bacon rolls you could ever imagine, and you can pretty much all day, if you wanted to, you could sit and scoff at Lords. Adelaide's pretty damn, or at least it was anyway. I haven't been there for years, but that used to be a good one.
In England, Edgbaston's amazing.
They take very good. Yes. So on the other side of the fence, when you're not at the players' lounge or whatever, but up in the media centre, it's very similar, isn't it? They put on a huge spread all day.
Amazing breakfast roll to kick you off.
Yeah. And it doesn't stop. I mean, it is, food and cricket are inextricably linked, aren't they? With the only game that stops for lunch and tea and whatever. And so it's bloody important, right?
There must be some amazing places to eat in Asia.
That always that's an interesting one, because they tend to do the stuff in the dressing rooms there.
Okay.
They'll bring in the bain-maries or whatever, and they have the little gas cylinders underneath, and they'll heat up the chicken and rice and whatever. And it, in some places it's spectacularly good, in other places not so much. And then of course in the modern era, the teams sort of taking their own chefs and doing their own thing, aren't they? So they probably don't see, hear, or taste any of it, which is perhaps a little bit of a shame. But the thing is, during the game, you're looking for fuel really, and something that's not going to make you sick. So you're not quite as. The only time I'm really bothered about it is at Lord's, because it kind of it's an event in itself, having lunch there. But the rest of the place, you just want to be able to get some decent protein in you, and have plenty of water, and then forget about it.
And then finally, what were your favourite places to play at worldwide?
What grounds or just tours?
Grounds.
I'd love playing at Lord's. I mean, again, slightly dull answer, but I didn't really enjoy it very much as a Surrey player. I don't think I ever made very many runs there, and it always seemed like a bit of a non-event. But then playing there for the first time in a Test match when it was full, and then suddenly you understood what all the fuss was about, and I enjoyed playing there. Decent record playing there. SCG it takes some beating. It's a fabulous arena, even with the changes and the sort of the old hills and whatever have gone, but they've been replaced by the amphitheatre type stands, and that was pretty cool. I always had a soft spot for playing in Trinidad, but maybe because I played in 2 wins there, and it's just it's a great island, and the rest of it. Where else? I tell you where I really, really love. I've never played there, but the ground at Pal, wherever it is, 50, 60 k's north of Cape Town is something very, very special. I mean, I've really enjoyed sort of calling games there, because you just this incredible fire pit skies on one side and mountains on the other. It's just gorgeous, vineyards, all the whole 9 yards. So that's pretty cool. I mean, where did we play?
You're not going to say here?
Well, I mean, of course, so that goes without saying. Absolutely goes without saying. This is kind of home, the best ground that I've ever played at. But you play it so often it doesn't make the list. You know what I mean? But it's obviously.
Cool. Well, I think that's a good place to finish. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions, and Mark, thank you so much for your answers.
My pleasure.
We are up and running in the T20 World Cup. If you'd not yet made your mind up about potentially heading out to Barbados for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, you might be in luck. An incredible couple of beachfront villas walking distance from the Kensington Oval have become available for the 2 weeks either side of the T20 World Cup final on the 29th of June. You can be enjoying panoramic views from your rooftop pool, a short walk down the beach from the World Cup final venue. Head to www.beachhousebarbados.com to find out more. Some news from English cricket this week. England and Durham bowler Brydon Carse has been banned for 3 months, with 13 months suspended on top of that after accepting charges of breaching cricket's anti-corruption rules by placing 303 bets on matches between 2017 and 2019. It is understood that these include Durham games, but not Durham games that Carse was involved in. His ECB central contract is unaffected. I guess that's pretty big news, but worth saying compared to other cricket betting stories. This is not Mohamed Asif, for example, in 2010.
No, I guess it's more akin to some of the stories we've seen in football with Ivan Toney and Sandro Tonali, in terms of players who just who really like betting and like doing it on the sport that they that they're involved in. And in those cases, in Toney and Tonali's cases, it was that they had gambling addictions, and we don't. Carse hasn't, there's not this is quite a new story, so we don't know what are the mitigating factors they've talked about with Carse, but you can see why the temptation to bet would be there. There is a lot of gambling sponsorship that surrounds cricket, and the sports are increasly intertwined. So yeah, but it's just it's a shame for him, and it's obviously these things were a long time ago as well. These were 7 to 5 years ago, and it's come at not a great time for him in terms of there are spots opening up for England, and
he's got a century contract.
Exactly, yeah.
We've got a question in from Richard about the T20 Blast. So the T20 Blast started last week. He says, it has been sad to watch the decline of the excellent T20 Blast this season. The opening week has been lost in the wake of the T20 World Cup, a tournament it clashes with, and many games are being streamed on YouTube and not getting a sniff on Sky Sports. It very much feels like the ECB are managing the fast decline of what was an excellent tournament, which fell out of favour after the launch of the ECB's vastly inferior new show pony, the 100. What are your thoughts on the future of this once great tournament, Joe?
Yeah, I think we've had an email like this at the start of the last 4 Blast campaigns, but it's absolutely right, and it feels more and more pertinent every year that it is being slowly ushered to the sidelines at a managed decline, and we kind of all knew this was the end game. We knew this was the way it was going to play out, however much the ECB protested that it would not, that the Blast would still maintain this position that it had previously. Well, how could it? You know, if something else comes along and knocks it from its position, it's obviously not going to be able to hold that same place in the domestic structure. It feels particularly the case this year with the T20 World Cup going on simultaneously. We've also got, a football European Championships that we're going into, and it feels like the Blast is so far down the pecking order in terms of sport. And cricket can't do anything about football, but it can do something about its own tournaments. And the ECB I don't think will be particularly upset with the way it's panned out. The lesser the competition the Blast becomes, the more energy they can put behind the 100, the more justification they feel they have to put behind the 100. And increasingly, there's not as many Blast games on Sky as there used to be. I think there's a lot on YouTube, which I haven't really got in the habit of watching live cricket on YouTube. I watch it on telly, and I don't really fire up my laptop to watch it. And I understand that's the way a lot of younger people will be watching the games. But it feels more and more like the Blast has become a thing that you go to rather than a thing that you watch on telly or that you can really follow the games, because the structure of the tournament is confusing. You've got, I think this year we've got 2 championship rounds right in the middle of the Blast group stage, which, we know the reasons for that, and the players don't like it, but this is the necessary evil to fit everything in. And then you've got the group stage finishes on July 19th, and then the quarterfinals starts on September the 3rd, and then you've got the finals day the weekend after that. So you've got this 6-week gap in the middle of the tournament. So by the time you get to the quarterfinals, no one apart from the people who are in it will remember who even got to the quarterfinals in the first place. It's very hard to construct a narrative around the tournament the way it's presented. And I think, to be honest, we find that on the podcast as well. It's they're brief snippets, but it's hard to make a storyline out of. So yeah, I absolutely understand why Richard.
Yeah.
Why Richard feels that way, and I agree. And I don't think it's going to be changing anytime soon. I think that's the ECB phrase, direction of travel that we are on.
I guess a couple of things I'd say. I think the streaming on YouTube is a good thing, and not being on Sky Sports, I don't think is that big a deal. So, for example, the numbers, I've been quite critical of counties making a big deal of streaming numbers. That's more around the championship. Their numbers in the Blast are genuinely good. Like, it's not unusual for a county to get 200,000 people watching one Blast game overall. Those are amazing numbers. And the way in which younger people in particular consume media, there'll be kids who watched England highlights on YouTube who will be fed the Blast as recommended watching. That's really good. It's completely free, and more people watch YouTube on their television. So I think the YouTube revolution is a really, really good thing. It might be different to how it might. I feel sorry for people who have Sky subscriptions and part of the reason why they have Sky subscription is to watch the Blast, because you're getting less of it than you used to. But I think overall, there being fewer games on Sky and everything being on YouTube, I think that's a good thing. On the format and how hard it is to follow, that is not really to do with the 100. The T20 Blast was impossible to follow before the 100. They've long had this weird. They've sometimes had quarterfinals straight after, and then months until the finals day. This time they're doing quarterfinals, then finals day in the same week. But that has been a problem for the Blast forever. It's been impossible to follow forever. It's really hard to get narrative, and I think that's a long-standing problem. And I appreciate that with the 100, it becomes harder to get the Blast right. But the Blast lost its own opportunity to be the premier competition a long, long time ago, I think. And we're seeing the results of it not making the most of that opportunity, say 10 years ago now. But yeah, I feel quite sad about it because there's some really, really good cricket going on that is, you turn on the TV and that Somerset Essex game that was televised, the first game on the first day of the tournament, that's a really high quality game of cricket. And if you look through the two teams, it's full of players on either side who are getting deals in the PSL, BBL, SA20, for example, and no one really knows it's happening. That I think is a great shame. And I think there are some parts of the Blast that I don't think are made a bigger deal enough of. So, for example, I appreciate the narrative around it doesn't really exist, but generally, the quarterfinals of the Blast, I think, are some of the most watchable white ball games English cricket produces each year, because you've got home crowds that are so invested in it, and the quality is generally very high. English cricket has never made the most out of that.
And final stays still a really good thing. That's always worked. It's just connecting the two. And I guess eventually you do come around to it. The Blast does have its moment, but it's pretty late in the summer, and the rest of it feels like we're just getting through this bit to get to the final bit. And obviously media coverage very minimal these days for the Blast, and there used to be more. I'm not saying it was headline news, but there used to be more.
Definitely.
And just one thing with the scheduling of it, which is part of the reason why is it harder to follow now when it's Thursday to Sunday? I think in some ways it is, because if you have Surrey playing 3 games on an opening weekend, that's a lot of their group done in like 4 days. And you kind of, if you you don't realise the Blast has started, and then Surrey are basically already halfway to a quarter-final spot.
Talk about overseas players. Sorry, you have Spencer Johnson, who's one of the most exciting T20 bowlers in the world. In the first 4 days of the competition, he'd already played 3 of his 8 matches, for example. Exactly. So a lot of people wouldn't have known that Spencer Johnson was around until he's only got 5 games left. Yeah,
and but the point I was going to make is that scheduling was something the counties wanted. That's one of the tricky things here. When we say about the ECB, the counties wanted games Thursday to Sunday, and now they've got it, but there are detriments to that as well. But then also, just from what Joe was saying about the ECB not minding about the Blast getting sidelined, I think in some ways they might secretly quite want it because of the power it gives to their other arguments. So when they're talking about needing private investment into the game to boost county cricket, they can cite falling numbers in the Blast, which has been done in certain media reports. But that is, the ECB have to some extent sidelined the Blast and contributed to that. Not that it was a fully, doing everything it should have been in the first place, but they have contributed to it doing less things it was doing. And also it means if counties are getting less money from those ticket sales and that sort of thing, then they are going to be more reliant on the funds they can get from the ECB, and then are more likely to agree to however the ECB says best to get those funds.
On the cricket itself, I watched 2 of Jamie Smith's silly knocks. So he got his career best score in 2 knocks in a row, striking at about 200 in each of them. And I guess he's making a name for himself more in red ball cricket. I know he's played in all these leagues, some of these leagues around the world, but this is his probably first proper breakout season in T20 cricket. He's amazing at getting on the back foot and pulling spinners for 6 straight. There's not a shot that I've seen a lot of players play. Harry Brook plays it occasionally. I spoke to him before the season, and he talked about how he wanted to spend the winter working on his white ball cricket. And part of that was actually just getting physically stronger. And I think you can see that with his 6 hitting. I think he hit something like 15 sixes in a combined 77 balls between the 2 innings, which is quite something. He's a leading run scorer in the competition so far. Matt Parkinson took a hat-trick for Kent, and he started well in general, and he was involved in a spirit of cricket moment, which people genuinely
Twist
like.
went wild.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so what happened was it was the last over of the Kent innings. They're batting first against Hampshire, and Chris Wood is bowling Kent a 9 down, hence Matt Parkinson's batting. The ball gets driven back into, I think, by Joey Everson, so it gets driven back down the ground. Parkinson's backing up quite a long way. It hits him, I think, on like sort of the elbow, maybe at the point of the elbow. He immediately sort of crumples in pain. The ball ricochets right to the feet of bowler Chris Wood, so he could just pick up the ball, walk to the stumps, knock off the bails, but he chooses not to. He just walks back to his mark, which was, that is laudable. One thing I did note was that he also didn't check on Parkinson. he just picks up the ball and goes back to his mark and is like, right, let's get on with this, which is fine, still maybe better than running him out. Then also what I thought was notable was the next ball Joseph hit for 4, and it looked like Kent might win by fewer than 4 runs quite late in the game. So Hampshire needed 7 off the last 3, and then Liam Dawson hit a 6, and they did win the game. But yeah, that was what happened there.
That's good spirited cricketing.
Yes.
And Joe, Tamal Mills has started very well. He's a leading wicket taker in the competition already. I guess some people might be surprised that he's not in the England World Cup squad.
Yeah, I chatted to him for the new issue of Wisden Cricket Monthly, which is out tomorrow. It was predominantly around Jofra Archer's return, which is, I think, probably cost him a place in the World Cup squad. Gus Atkinson would have been in contention as well, but I suspect Mills might have snuck in if Archer wasn't there. And yeah, he's 2 fourthers already this summer. He's captaining Sussex as well, I think, in the Blast. He's still a really, really good bowler. And I also was speaking to him about his 2017 auction when he became the most expensive overseas bowler in IPL history at that point. And just to go back to the impact of the Blast and perhaps its lessening impact, he talked about clean bowling Chris Gale on Sky Sports in the 2016 summer, and I think it was from memory, it was a fast Yorker, 90-mile-an-hour Yorker, or certainly full delivery. Cleaned up Gale. Nick Knight does a nice bit of commentary, gets clipped up, it does the rounds, and Mills described that as kind of the catalyst for the year that followed, where he then got a series of overseas franchise gigs, got an England tour in India just before the IPL, bowled well, then got this huge IPL deal which literally changed his life overnight. And I was thinking again, would if you did that in the Blast now, would that have the same impact? It would potentially get you a 100 deal, and then you do that on TV in the 100, and then that paves the way for what follows. But it doesn't feel like it has the same kind of grasp of people's attention. I mean, you told me that Mills had clean bowled Lamashane with a really good delivery, and I have to say that had passed me by. I'd seen his numbers, but I didn't know he'd done that. Had that done the rounds on social media? Perhaps it had.
Sort of. I think there's an element of T20 fatigue in that you actually just see so much good cricket.
There's too much good stuff that it's hard to separate.
There's so much good cricket. Whereas go back to 2016, there are fewer leagues. There are, in fairness, more games on Sky, so no streaming. So when something interesting happened in a game on TV, people would talk about it because there weren't you couldn't see what happened in the other games. Whereas now, if a game is on TV, you're competing with so many different games of cricket for space. And as a really good example, actually, he's bowled one of the best players in the world, and no one knows it. Whereas 8 years ago, that changed his life.
And I guess if there was an injury in England's World Cup squad, I think he would probably be front of the queue to get out there, and those things won't be unnoticed by the England management. But yeah, it feels like it's a tougher tournament to get noticed for all the reasons we've just talked about.
Ben, innings of the tournament has been played by
Michael Pepper.
What did Michael Pepper do?
He finished 101 off 44, chasing down what was it the highest total? Or certainly one of the highest totals of the tournament so far against Middlesex. And Michael Pepper, you saw one of these names that floats around country, but he's building a very, very good T20 record base, especially for Essex in the Blast. So he averages 30 for Essex in the Blast and strikes at 150, which is just very good for a player in that role. He had to go in the ILT20 over the winter, and that went okay, averaging 23, striking 140. Is yet to crack the 100. So last year for London Spirit, he faced 5 balls and was dismissed by 3 of them.
Okay.
So they have stuck with him for this year. He's still in that squad, and hopefully, this sort of inning shows why. And he is the kind of player sort of that the 100 should be kind of built for as a platform, and to give players those kind of those moments for the players who are like maybe just below the England reckoning, but that their level of talent still deserves, and hopefully he can get that on the 100 this year, I suppose.
Bit of English domestic news, I guess. Kumar Sangakkara turned out for a 3rd division club side in the Dorset Cricket League this week. So Sangakkara, who retired from international cricket 9 years ago now, batted 5 for Shillingston CC against Kingston Lacey CC, and scored 68 off 50 before he was bowled by a guy called John Burns.
Bowl John.
Well bowled John.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure John will be telling that story.
Do we know how he got him? We haven't seen footage
other
of this.
than that it was bowled.
Other than bowled.
Not at all.
I'd imagine John would tell us it was an unplayable away seaming Jaffa that just clipped the top of off.
But it's one of those leagues where even though Sangakkara is playing for the first team of his club. There are third 11s in that league. So quite similar to Ricky Clark, I suppose, a couple of summers ago when he scored a double 100 playing club cricket.
And everyone got very angry.
And everyone got really angry. We posted something on our Instagram page about this, and Keith Barker tagged Ricky Clark and just said thoughts ? Which I thought was very, very funny.
What's the connection with Sangakkara in this club? Do we know?
It's where he lives.
Okay.
So he's lived in Dorset for the last year. And someone's clearly been asking him every week, Kumar, you around this Saturday?
And he had a bowl as well, didn't he?
He had a bowl.
He took the match-winning wicket. Yeah.
One for 32 off 7.
That's great. Can you imagine Sangakkara coming up with all sort of excuses, or not excuses, but I'm busy. I'm sort of doing Sky this weekend. Yeah, I'm doing a bit of MCC stuff this weekend. Yeah, sorry. No, I will do it. I will get there, and then eventually it's sort of the thing you sort of know things going to happen. A bit like Jim playing for your team, Yas.
Well, I was going to say a bit like Butch playing for my team. I've asked Butch a few times, and even though
that's surely not getting anywhere at all.
And even though we've had a couple of games around where he lives, he's always said he's unavailable.
Hasn't he famous? I thought he hadn't picked up a bat since he quit playing. I thought
that is what he has
said. Apart
from
the gear test many years ago.
That is what he has said, but I'm still retaining hope that when we're short, and we are short most weeks, that he has.
Has Phil turned out yet? Have you had Phil?
Phil's not turned out yet either. But I've got the number 3 slot open for Butch.
You know how to get him.
You haven't currently got a number 3. That feels like bad captaincy.
Not so far this season.
How to get him is you should go to Reddit, make an account, leave a question saying, "What are you doing this Saturday? Can you play for Roll Paul MCC?"
Yeah. Joe, there's a new magazine out tomorrow. What are the highlights?
We've got Jimmy Anderson on the cover. You might have heard he's stepping down from Test cricket.
Covered that a couple of pods ago.
We've done that, yeah. The news has just hit Ireland actually, so we're all surprised over there. So the cover story is another absolute stonker from Rob Smythe, using the CricViz database to dig as deep as I think it's possible to go into James Anderson's career, sort of charting his evolution as a bowler, how he's changed. Just exploring all the aspects of his bowling which make him so special. It is such a good piece. I picked out a couple of highlights to whet people's appetite. So this is a quote from Rob. Since the start of the 2010-11 Ashes, when Anderson started to prove he was less fair-weather friend and more all-weather champion, he has taken 214 Test wickets at 26.42 overseas. And the last 5 years of his Test career, Anderson averaged 28.62 at home and 20.16 abroad. The harder the yakka, the more he relished it. Which obviously, the few critics of Anderson that remain would still make this argument that, he does it under cloudy skies in England. But obviously that stat shows that is complete nonsense in the latter part of his career. Another one, Anderson took 92 wickets in Asia, a record for a touring seamer. Over a third of those wickets came after he'd turned 35.
Wow.
Rob writes, Asia is no continent for old men, not when they bowl fast. Between them, all the other seam bowlers in England's history have the grand total of 1 wicket after the age of 35 in Asia. And that was taken by Basil D'Oliveira.
Wow.
That's just a taste of I don't know how much time Rob spends on these pieces. I suspect quite a lot, because he does dig out some great stuff, and they're beautifully written as well. They're more than just stats pieces. They're really, really lovingly done. We put Jimmy on the cover, and then the other big stuff is the T20 World Cup. Not a preview, I guess, because we're out 4 days into the tournament, but there's loads in there. Lowdown on all 20 teams. Tim Wigmore's done a really nice introduction to the tournament. Tim writes so well about the kind of the business of cricket. He did a book on it, so I guess he should do. Talking about the fact that it's in the States and the opportunities that has for the game to break out from this kind of big 3 model. And he also talks about the fact that with it being 20 teams all starting the tournament at the same stage, he writes that this could be considered the sport's first genuinely global event, particularly because it's being held not in India, England or Australia, where the last however many tournaments have been. I write about Jofra's return, chatted to Mal Mills and Chris Jordan, who Chris Jordan was quite sweet, really. They're very, very close. He said in the interview he considers Jofra his family, talking about the struggle of watching him not be able to play, and says I'm as excited as anyone because I'm his family, but I'm a fan as well. I'm a fan. I want to see him play cricket. All fingers crossed for Jofra in this tournament. Mel Farrell interviews Darren Sammy, who obviously is West Indies white ball coach now, captain West Indies to 2 World Cup titles as well. So he reflects on those, his fallouts with the board in the past, and the fact that it's good to forgive, which is what led him to being part of the setup again. We've got a feature on Uganda's rise. Obviously, we didn't talk about Uganda.
It didn't go very well for them. They got thumped by
Afghanistan. But the game against their game against PNG, one team is going to get their first World Cup win. So that would be a nice occasion.
Unless the rain does.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you say that. And then Cameron Ponsonby, who I think we're obliged to say of this parish after that.
Yeah.
Oh, there's quite a few parishes, isn't it? Yeah.
Travelling deacon. Yeah.
Goes and has a net. We basically paid Cam to go and have a net with Julian Wood because he wanted to work on his power hitting, which only became clear to me when Cam had set it all up and I hadn't really necessarily worked out what the feature was. But it's very, very well done, and it's some real good insight into power hitting coaching and what a lot of the players are doing now. Cam talks about that having no stumps and just having a whack, and I guess the most interesting aspect is all the different gizmos that Julian Wood, who was this kind of fairly inconsequential Hampshire batter who in his own career didn't have a huge amount of success, was a hitter who everyone said to him that you need to stop hitting and playing properly, and he got into T20 coaching, and now he is the go-to guy for people who want to work on their power hitting game in the professional games. Worked with Bairstow, Carlos Brathwaite, loads of others, and other good stuff.
Columns from Andrew Miller and Mark Ramprakash.
Yeah, both very interesting in their own way. So let's go with Ramprakash first, who writes about the 100 and his concerns about what it will do for English cricket, but very much through his lens. So he works as head of cricket, I think that's his title, at Harrow School, and he also works on the Middlesex pathway. So he's talking about the 100 through his lens as a pathway coach and what he's seeing the impact of that on young players and what he thinks will happen in the future. And he says his go-to has always been, if you nail the basics, you can play any format successfully and expand from there. But he said increasingly that's very hard to convince young players because the basics aren't necessarily required for T20 cricket. And the way that even counties now spend a lot of their winters working on power hitting or expansive hitting. And it's quite a personal piece from Mark, who is really struggling with his own relationship with the game, particularly in the direction it's going. And he says he feels it's very much motivated by greed, and he has real concerns for the type of cricketers that England will be producing if the ECB get their way and the 100 becomes this monster. And obviously that has financial benefits for the English game, but he's saying, well, what we're working for? What's the end game? What does cricket actually look like? Does the county championship still exist? Because why would it if the counties are going to use their resources elsewhere and players don't see any need to play in it? So whilst we're doing all these things to future-proof the game, at least the ECB say so, are we actually future-proofing the game that we love, or is it going to become a thing that doesn't actually look particularly recognisable? And what cricketers are we going to be producing? He talks about Harry Brook and Jaiswal as two examples of brilliant T20 players who are all-round packages. But he's not convinced that we'll continue to see cricketers produce like that because they might think, why bother with the red ball stuff? Because I can earn so much for such a short space of time. And comparatively, less work, really. So that's definitely worth dipping into. And then Andrew Miller is writing about Monty and Monty's brief political escapade with... what are they called? The party?
The Workers' Party.
Workers' Party of Great Britain, George Galloway's party, for whom Monty was briefly a candidate for Ealing South for 9 days, I think. And Andrew's trying to basically work out how this happened. He has worked with Monty in the past and has, I think, been kind of a sounding board for Monty, who's interested in getting into the media himself. And Andrew tracks down Monty's lawyer, Matab Anwar Aziz, and it seems to have been Aziz who came up with the idea in the first place that Monty stood for Parliament. This lawyer claims to have Imran Khan and Wazi Makram among his clients, and he thought Monty would make a good politician. There's this quote from the column. Monty's a well-spoken guy. This is from the lawyer, Aziz. Monty's a well-spoken guy. He's a good chap. There's no bad bone in him. I thought that he would come over quite well as a genuine person who wants to assist people, but I don't think he realised that in politics you have to have a really callous skin look at Imran. I was his lawyer for 20 years. He was too honest for the political system, and unfortunately, he's in a position now where he's in jail. That should never have happened. So yeah, there you go. I think we can all be grateful for Monty that he got out when he did. Even his manager doesn't seem to have known exactly that it was happening. The PCA weren't aware of it, and I think some good friends in the game alerted Monty to the fact that it might not be the best thing for his future and reputation to get involved in this. I think we all thought that's a bit funny when it happened, or at least bizarre or odd. But I think in some ways he's quite a vulnerable character who can be taken advantage of.
Yeah, I've always felt slightly uncomfortable when there have been moments from Monty since the end of his playing career that people have found funny. And when you hear how Miller has framed it, there's an element of people taking advantage of a guy who has been very vulnerable in the past.
Absolutely. And even like going on Celebrity Mastermind, and it was hard not to laugh at some of those answers, but also, and I think money's going to charity there as well, so ultimately it's probably a good thing to do. But also, like, are people looking out for his best interests, or are they just, we can get Monty Panesar on this show and make a few quid out of it? Because I think he is a bit susceptible to that. So anyway, I think we should all be glad that Monty is not going into British politics for several reasons, and hopefully he can find something in the game that really works for him. Because as Andrew writes, like, he was a sensationally talented cricketer who perhaps didn't get all of that talent out, but still had an unbelievably good record, and should have a lot to offer in the game.
Well, absolutely loads in the magazine. As always, we'll leave a link in our description for both the print and digital versions. That is everything for today's show. Cheers, Joe. Cheers, Ben. Just to finish, Kia want to help you get closer to the action and create inspiring memories that will last a lifetime. Last year, Kia launched a competition to give young cricketers the opportunity to play at the inspiring Kia Oval, and this year they want you to do it all over again. The Kia Young Cricketer competition is an amazing experience for 11 to 16-year-olds to live out their cricketing dreams. The day will consist of a morning coaching session from Surrey's fantastic coaching staff and an afternoon tournament on the iconic Field of Green. If you are age 11 to 16 and want to experience this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity on September the 14th, all you need to do is enter the link in the description.